Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Wednesday edition. Man, I got a day ahead of myself today. I've been having some issues this morning. The Wednesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. This is episode 893. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is September 27th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. Hopefully everything finds everybody well. I am just trying to open the chat over on the main studio for Blog Talk Radio. I have not been able to do that the past couple days. I was even trying yesterday, and for some reason it's just not hooking up. And so the chat is not working so far over on Blog Talk Radio side, and it has to be their end because I have everything updated that I can get updated, the Flash player and the whole 9 yards. So we're just hoping against hope that it might get caught up. But if you're listening on Blog Talk Radio, and you can sneak over to the chat room at on my YouTube channel, I'll be over there. And let me type something in here real quick. For some reason, my chat room is not getting the words typed in on my main computer. Let me get out of that and go back into it. Let me do this. There it is. Good morning, folks. I want to see if I can pop that out again. Let's see if that stays. Yep. That worked. Okay. For some reason, I'm just not having good luck this week with my technology. I do apologize for that. All right. When we left the show with you on Monday, we were talking about the NFL. We're going to talk about that again today. I want to wrap this up, and I want to give you my final thoughts on everything. And there's a couple articles I want to share with you. And one, I've never really looked at it this way before, but Jazz Shaw over at Hot Air put out an article, The Left's Brilliant Scam Behind the NFL Anthem Protest. And when I saw the title, a light went off in my head, and I'm like, oh, I think I know what Jazz is going to say. And I was pretty much spot on with what Jazz was going to say about the whole encounter. So it just amazes me how I didn't notice this before, my mind didn't go this way. And I think he makes a very, very good point on this. Plus, I have an article over at Mises.org by Ryan McMacken, Stop Wrapping the Flag Around Pro Sports. And Ryan makes some good points in this article also. We're going to concentrate on those two articles today, and I got other stuff that you can go over and read. It'll be on the show notes page right after the show. So sit back and relax. We're going to have a really good show here, and hopefully we're going to put this, in my mind anyway, we're going to put this NFL thing to bed. I think way too many people are taking this too seriously. I think way too many people, like Ryan saying, we're wrapping up patriotism and the flag, national anthem, everything too much into sports, which it's a good thing to a certain extent. It's a good thing, tradition. We want to, we live in a free country. We want to honor that country. We want to honor the folks that serve for allowing us to have this freedom. But that's where it should end. And so like I said, we'll definitely get into that. Just a little note about yesterday. I had to take care of a couple things, and then my wife and I went to the biggest state fair in Pennsylvania. It's not officially a state fair, but it's the biggest fair in Pennsylvania, the Bloomsburg Fair. They get almost 500,000 visitors throughout the week from Saturday to Saturday. It started last Saturday and this upcoming Saturday, and it was brutal out there. I mean, wasn't really humid, which was good, but it was close to 90 degrees, full sunshine, a little bit of haze. I did get a little sun on my neck. I'm literally and physically a redneck today. My daughter saw me last night in the kitchen, and she poked at my neck. She said, "Dad, what happened to your neck?" And I felt back here, and it felt a little bit warm, and I looked in the mirror, upstairs, and I got just a little bit of sun, but it was great. I had a good time with my wife. We always have a good time. We go to the fair. We don't always hang around together completely. She likes to go look at the arts and crafts and things like that, and I love my wife, but that's just not my cup of tea. So we part ways. She doesn't like going to see all the equipment, all the farm equipment, all the display stuff like that, so that's where I go. And we've been doing that for years now. It doesn't bother her, doesn't bother me, because we do spend the majority of our time together. They have a skyline where you get on these seats and it goes above the fair from one end of the fair to the other, and you get to see the whole fair, and you can go one way or round trip it. And what we normally do is we spend most of our time on the displays down at the main entrance, or the parking lot where we come in, and then we this time anyway, we got on the sky lift, or sky ride, and took it to the other end of the fair. Got to see a cowboy doing trick shooting and horse riding and lassoing and stuff like that, knife throwing. Really good. We got to walk around and see a lot of other things at the fair, a lot of other displays. Some friends that have stands up there, we got to stop and visit with them. One acquaintance, her daughter rides with my daughter at EO's Horseback Therapy Riding, and they run a peanut roasting stand up there. So we always make a point to go over and talk to them and buy some peanuts. I love salted roasted peanuts. They were working on a batch, so they didn't have any of the salted ones out. So we bought just the regular peanuts, which I like them too. Peanuts, roasted peanuts are roasted peanuts. I don't care if you have salt on them or not. So we had a really good day yesterday. Sort of recharged my batteries. I actually felt pretty good with my fibromyalgia, so that went well. So I'm actually a little on the tired side today. I had my physical therapy and stuff like that, but we're good to go on the show. I do want to thank my listeners over at Blog Talk Radio for being there for me, for downloading the show, listening to the show. I'm sending a message out to Blog Talk Radio again, because it seems like that my listenerships dropped off like they did before when they redid the analytics. And I'm just wondering if they're doing the same thing again. It's kind of frustrating. So I'm just letting you know there may be a major decision coming in the future with Blog Talk Radio. Like I said, I'm debating whether I want to stay on that platform or throw my whole weight and force behind YouTube, and then just take the audio from YouTube and put it on a podcast site, something that's affiliated with my Blue hosting possibly, and just maintain Blog Talk Radio as an archive for what it is, and then maybe someday hire somebody to empty all the audios off of the site, and we'll put them somewhere, put them on a computer somewhere to keep them as an archive. So that's something that's down the road in the future. We haven't made a total decision on that yet. But I'm extremely happy with what's going on with YouTube. My viewerships are coming up, although they've actually redid a couple things on the viewerships. They're not going to start monetizing any videos until you reach a certain threshold of views. And it'll probably be my luck I get that threshold of views and they're going to change it again. Just like I'm 55 now. It used to be not too many years ago when you became 55, you got the senior discounts and all that kind of stuff. Well, now that's up to 60, and probably by the time I'm 60, they'll push it to 65, and I'll never see any senior discounts when I go shopping and stuff like that. So I titled today's show Politics and Sports, Biting the Hand That Feeds. And hopefully that's provocative enough that you can possibly understand where I'm coming from on this with this episode, and we're going to wrap it up today. The official drink of the Dan Clemens Show is Rocky Mountain High Brand. This is a hemp-infused carbonated drink. They have iced tea, they have a lemonade, they have 3 different flavors of an energy drink. They have energy shots, they have power bars, they have Eagle Spirit water. They run the whole gambit. And this more than anything, I think the hemp-infused drink has been helping with my fibromyalgia and the pain that comes along with that. And possibly, if I was drinking the energy drinks, I know it'd take care of the fatigue, but then I'd never get to sleep. So, and full disclosure, I do own stocks in Rocky Mountain High Brand. They're part of my retirement portfolio, as it were. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the Paul's epistle to the Philippians, chapter 1, verses 15 through 18. And this is something, there's some people out there that really get hung up on this, especially I met a lot of folks in the Church of Christ that really get hung up on this particular passage. And let me read this to you, starting in verse 15. Some indeed preach Christ even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely supposing to add affliction to my chains, but the latter out of love, knowing that I'm appointed for the defense of the gospel. Well, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached. And in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice. Well, I have a lot of friends and brethren out there that just are totally against anybody but folks in the Church of Christ preaching Christ and preaching about Christ. Oh, they're not in the church. You know, we shouldn't listen to them. And I'm here to tell you, there are a lot of preachers out there that they'll preach a lesson and they'll get it 100% scripturally right. Yet, if you go back, and this is where one of my tests are, if you go back and talk to them or sit down and try to find out what their thoughts on or what plan of salvation they follow, they do not follow the biblical plan of salvation. Hear the gospel, repent of your sins, confess Jesus before men, and be baptized for the remission of your sins and receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. It's usually we'll kneel down and say the sinner's prayer, which you'll find no example in the New Testament anywhere of just praying God into your heart, anything like that. They get the basic plan of salvation wrong, but yet when they preach other lessons out of the Bible, they're 100% accurate. So I'm with Paul on this. You know, we can teach people the proper role of baptism. We can teach people how to, you know, what the Bible says on how to become saved, how to put on Jesus in baptism. We can teach them that. But I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, if they're teaching a good lesson and someone comes to me and I'll talk to them about it, I'm just not going to ignore it. I'll go over the lesson with them, and if it's biblical, I'll say it's biblical, and we'll point out where it isn't through Scripture, not because of what Dan says or you say, but through Scripture. And so, as Paul said, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached. And in this I rejoice, yes, I will rejoice. And that's the bottom line, folks. We need to be able to preach Christ and make sure that that's where the focus is. It's not on me, it's not on you, it's on God's Word. And if they get God's Word right anywhere, we should praise them for that. And if they get it wrong, we should sit down and reason with them and try to instruct them further on the better way to be as far as God's Scriptures. Today's quote, man, I thought this was really good. This is by Philip, and I know I'm gonna mess this up. Melanchthon. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Melanchthon. Nothing can be said so clearly as to preclude the possibility of it being misunderstood. Oh man, this guy Philip should get a Nobel Peace Prize for that one. Nothing can be said so clearly as to preclude the possibility of it being misunderstood. This is why we need to sit down and have reasoned discussions, and yes, debates. Debates, folks, are just arguments with rules about any subject. We should be reasonable in our discussions. We should be willing to sit down. If I say something, I should be willing to take the time to make sure it's my intent and meaning is clear. It's clear. It's understood by the recipient. Far too often in our day today, we say something and then someone takes offense, and then we take offense because they took offense and there was a misunderstanding. Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's a nurturing thing. They weren't raised that way, the same way you were, or they don't think along the same lines you think along. And so we don't take the time to make sure that we're understood, that the receiver of our words understands and doesn't come away with a misunderstanding. And I thought this quote, nothing can be said so clearly as to preclude the possibility of it being misunderstood. And folks, this is what's happening today. This is what's happening with this NFL thing. This is what's happening in politics today. This is what's happening in healthcare. All these, there's so much misunderstanding because people refuse to sit down and discuss things. Sit down and define terms, define words. Again, this was something that they told us, and for some reason I remember this. We went through orientation when we went over to Scotland, and part of the orientation was culture. And certain terms mean different things in different cultures. And the one is, and not that I'm in the habit of going around calling women cows. You know, and to my recollection, I never have. But over in Scotland, when you call a woman a cow, you're calling her a prostitute. I guess it's just a kind way of saying that she's a prostitute. Like I said, I'm not in the habit, never was, never will be in the habit of calling a woman a cow, but I'm just pointing that out as an example. So we need to sit down and define our terms. One of the things, before I get in this NFL thing, and I'm setting up a short video on this and doing some more research on this. Refuse Fascism is a website, and there's a girl out there in Berkeley that is very boisterous and just is 180 degrees away from the truth. She defines fascism totally different from the way it's traditionally defined. Not the way I defined it, the way it traditionally is defined in any textbook, any dictionary older than 20 years old. Now, today, everything is relative. And this is part of the problem with the NFL here, with this whole NFL blow up. Too many people, everything's relative. To this young lady and Refuse Fascism, they've redefined the term fascism, and it doesn't mean what you think it means. Therefore, there's going to be a misunderstanding there. She's misunderstood, and when you try to talk to her without defining some basic terms to begin with, then you're misunderstood. And I was watching a video with Sargon of Akkad, and he does a pretty good job of analyzing political things, although his language can get colorful, if I may say that. He was showing, he had a video of this, and didn't say much at the beginning of this video, just let her rant and rave. And like I said, you can see just by listening to her how she's defining her terms. And he asked a couple questions about, well, you know, you guys are all for communism, and they are. They're collectivists. They're all for communism, but they don't define communism like you and I define communism. You know, and Sargon of Akkad pointed out that in the last century, the communism was responsible for like 150 to 200 million deaths, you know, because of communism, and you're wanting to support this oppressive type ideology. And again, they're not defining communism like you and I define communism. Go to the NFL. What's happening in the NFL? Well, we're getting there's too many sticks in the pot, too many cooks in the kitchen, as it were, and there's too many comments coming from the wrong people in the country that are stirring up things that shouldn't be stirred up. This is one of these occasions I don't agree with Donald Trump. This is one of the occasions that I don't agree with him sticking his nose into, and I know this is going to tick some people off, these private companies, even though they get federal tax dollars, local tax dollars. In essence, they're a private corporation. They're, if you want an example of perfect crony capitalism, go to the NFL. Go to the NFL. These teams in the NFL, they make multiple billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. Like last year, I think it was estimated they grossed like $14 billion, and yet they still got the equivalent of like over the years, over a certain period, like $1 billion in tax, in actual tax giveaways, tax cuts, and all that kind of stuff, and yet other businesses don't get the same preferential treatment that actually employ people year round. You see what I'm saying here? So there's there's a disconnect here. I do believe Donald Trump, in the beginning with his Twitter account, tweeting out he was getting around the lamestream media. I think he can pull back from that now. There are sufficient new media sources out there that don't rely on the lamestream media. I'm one of them. I don't rely on the lamestream media for all my stories. Do I use some of the stories from the lamestream media when I'm doing my show? Absolutely, I do. I use them as like a teaching moment, more or less. I hate using the Washington Post or the New York Times. I like the Washington Times and the New York Post. You just I always thought that was funny. New York Times is bad, Washington Post is bad, but the New York Post is decent. I won't say it's totally okay, but it's better than the New York Times. And the Washington Times is way better, far and away better than the Washington Post as far as their biases and reporting things correctly. But President Trump, I do believe he stepped over his boundaries. Now, he made some points that I made on Monday, and I was talking about, free speech is not absolute in the workplace. And these football players are in the workplace when they come out on the field. As soon as they step in that locker room to get ready to go out and play, they're in the workplace. And there's certain things that should not go on in the workplace. And if it does, then there's going to be some severe consequences, not only for the individual, but for the companies as a whole. And we see this happening in the NFL. They're allowing these politics to come into the NFL. I'll just pick on the NFL. It's starting to filter in the NBA and some other sports, but right now we're in the football season and NASCAR season's winding up here. But that is the workplace. Now, traditionally, before any sporting event is started here in the United States, traditionally, it's not a law, it's tradition that they sing the national anthem before the event happens. Now, is that right or wrong? Neither. It's neither right and it's neither wrong. It just is. Now, would it be wrong if we didn't sing the national anthem before we played a game? No. It would not be wrong. Now, it'd be going against tradition. This is how my great-great-grandfather did it back when baseball started, and by gummy, that's what we're going to do today. People get their hackles up over breaking tradition. But in the analysis of things, in looking at freedom and liberty in the United States, is it right or is it wrong? It's neither. If a team or a stadium or a whole sports franchise like the NFL or the NBA or National Hockey League or National Baseball League, if they decide as a whole that they're going to do away with singing, doing the traditional national anthem or Pledge of Allegiance or both before the game starts, again, it's neither right nor wrong. Now, you can argue both, you're being unpatriotic. Well, folks, if I'm watching sports, I'm there to watch the sports. I don't know how you prove your patriotism. You know what I mean? You can wear the flag. I had my veteran T-shirt on. I got a new veteran hat at the Bloomsburg Fair yesterday. Got a good deal on 3 hats. They're $4 a piece, and I got 3 for $10. And I'm a veteran. And this is the one thing that's getting lost in this whole argument, is that as a veteran, as someone who served, I'm a Cold War warrior, folks. I served on a nuclear ballistic submarine tender. We were on the front lines of the Cold War. I mean, when I was stationed in Holiday, Scotland, we were numero uno to be taken out if the balloon went up. And so I served to defend the freedoms and liberties we had back home, or we have back home here in the United States. And part of that is, if someone doesn't want to participate in it, okay. That's their right to do. But they have to remember also that there could be consequences to that. I have articles in here about NFL Sunday Night Football ratings down after national anthem protest by Jim E. over at thepoliticalinsider.com. He posted this on September 25th. They're down. Now, Monday Night Football was a blip in the ratings, because what happened on Monday Night Football, real quick, if you don't know, they were just talking about the Cowboys. I don't know if they're opponents. I don't even remember. I don't really care. I don't like the Cowboys. The Cowboys knelt down before the national anthem. And then when the national anthem was ready to be sung, they stood back up and they were locked in arms with each other. They stood during the national anthem. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. If the teams want to allow players to kneel during the national anthem, I think that's a team decision, because they are a business. I think that's a team decision. Could there be consequences to that? Absolutely. The Steelers were supposed to stay in the locker room, or at least in the tunnel, during the national anthem and then come out. One person came out, the Ranger, what was his name? Villanueva was a Ranger, served 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He stood out there, and then later on he was, and people say, oh, he was forced he was forced to retract his statement, to backpedal on that. And if you saw the guy, he's a tackle, dude. I don't think anybody's forcing him to do anything. Okay? And he knows about unit cohesion. He knows about unit, not only cohesion, but morale and unity, all that kind of stuff. He knows all about that. So did he backpedal? I don't think he did. I think in the heat of the moment, he did what he did. I think was he correct or not? I think he was. Other people say no, he wasn't. You see what I'm getting at here? This whole NFL thing, this whole anthem thing, this traditional thing, has opened up a total can of worms out here. It really has. And the problem is, it's going to take a while to get that, and you can put this genie back in the bottle, but it's going to take a while to do so. And these business owners, and the NFL is a business. Roger Goodall's commissioner of a business. He's like the CEO. All these other owners who are part of the NFL, they run businesses. And this is why, and I was talking about this on Monday, this is why it's not a good thing to have politics in the workplace. If you're on your break, you're outside the workplace, you want to talk about it, fine. Once you come back in the building and you're on somebody else's time, you're on the clock, no. It's not fine unless you're in the business of talking about politics, like on this show. And again, I control the content of this show. You know, I tell folks it's a family-friendly show. I got some school-age children that actually listen to the podcast or watch the video with their parents, their homeschoolers and stuff like that. And they don't need to be hearing any colorful language. And so I don't allow that on my show. I don't allow you to attack somebody on my show. If you want to debate somebody, I'll set something up. But you're not allowed to just outright attack somebody. You can disagree with what they say without attacking folks. And I do that all the time. I don't personally attack somebody. You know, I don't call them names and run them down. You know, their ideas is a different story. It's an idea. It's something that when it's put out in the marketplace of ideas, it should be debated. It should be discussed. It should be totally discussed. But, folks, this is just such a teachable moment here with the NFL. It really is. Good morning, Dave. How you doing? Yeah, and Dave makes a good point here. He says, while I agree that patriotism is not determined by the singing of the national anthem before a game, I think it serves to unite the crowd and celebrate the freedom we enjoy and play in these games. Absolutely. You know, and it's a traditional thing that we do. It's been, I tried to look it up and couldn't find, and maybe I just wasn't looking hard enough, where the first instance of the national anthem was used in a sporting event. But honestly, I'm 55 years old, and I know it's been going on my whole lifetime. And even before then, I know it's been going on before then. Yeah, and there's a couple stories going on about Villanueva. You know, some people, Dave said he heard some people say he went out to see the flag, and then the anthem started while he was there, so couldn't leave. And you know, and that's the soldier in him. You know, when I was on, I used to deliver to military bases. You know, as part of my truck driving job. There were times I got there before reveille was sounded. I was at the, you know, at the warehouse, and there was a lot of times I'd be standing outside, you know, waiting for the folks to come in and unload me and stuff like that. And even though I wasn't in uniform, when reveille was sounded and they started raising the flag, I found, you know, where the flag was. I faced it, removed my hat, and stood there silently and respectfully. That's the military man in me. You know, it was something that was drilled into us when we're on base. When you hear that, when you hear taps or you hear reveille and the flag's going up or coming down, you stop, face the flag, and you salute. And that's just being respectful. And again, I can't stress this enough. This is a tradition that is going on. It is neither good nor bad. You know, and it shouldn't be forced on people. If people, I've seen people in stands, they'll stand there, they won't take their hat off, and they won't put their hand over their heart, and that's fine. I've seen people sit while I was there and doing the same thing. You know, I can't force them to stand, not at all, and nor would I want to. Would I like to sit down and have a discussion with them, what their thoughts are? Sure, why not? Try to find out what they're thinking. But the point is, getting back to what I was talking about on Monday's show, the NFL is a business, and this is a teachable moment. This is exactly what happens when you allow this type of politicking going on in your business. Ratings are down. I was reading articles. I don't have them on my show notes page here. I was reading articles. And the reason I don't have my show notes page, I couldn't confirm them. DirecTV, with their Sunday NFL ticket, their Sunday ticket, people are asking for refunds, and they're starting. According to the article, I couldn't confirm. They're doing refunds. Sponsorships are being pulled. There's a Denver player that a sponsorship's being pulled, and I think one of them was a local sponsorship, one was a national sponsorship, and these are endorsement, I should say. And these professional players, they have endorsements outside of the team where they personally, and they make a lot of money off these endorsements. Okay? Make a lot of money off these endorsements. And so, and I believe if an advertiser wants to pull, you know, or if a company wants to pull an endorsement from somebody, they want to pull ads from something because they don't agree with what's going on, I have no problem with that. This whole thing, I know I'm going back and forth here between the NFL and other things. This whole thing with the what they call the adpocalypse on YouTube. It was pretty much before I came on the scene in here, and all this was going on while I was getting set up to do live streaming here. It was pretty much the Wild West, wherever they put these ads. And I actually complained before to Blog Talk Radio. I was getting these ads. Here I'm a Christian political talk show, and I'm getting these ads for either Russian dating sites on the Blog Talk Radio, and that's just an example. I can't remember exactly what the dating sites were. I don't agree with the dating sites. Some of them were of more a risque nature. There's an online store called Adam and Eve, and it ain't what you think. It's an adult store. I'll just put it like that. They were popping up in my ad feed, and I just sent them. I said, look, I can't have these in my ad feed. That's one reason why I don't use Google AdSense, because I can't control what ads get shown on my stuff, and if I can't control it, I'm not going to do it. And they said they were sorry. They would look into it. I haven't on Blog Talk Radio. I haven't seen anything. YouTube. Basically what was happening, and now what happened was it was more politicized than the way I handled it, but it was pretty much the Wild West. YouTube was putting these videos on any site, any video on any site, whether you agreed with it or not. And I kind of thought, well, if I'm a Christian political talk show, shouldn't they be sensitive to the ads that actually get put on my site, you know, my channel, as it were? And no. It wasn't. Now, what happened was there were some of these advertisers on these conservative channels on YouTube, and the progressives, the left, the anti-freedom folks out there didn't like that because they were getting trounced, and they still are. Even after all the demonetizations going on and everything, by far and away, conservative, libertarian YouTube channels are just walking away with the show. And the reason why this happens, folks, is because when you sit down and start reasoning out which would you rather follow, freedom and liberty or anti-freedom and liberty, there's a distinction there, folks. There's a clear line in the sand of which way you want to go there. 1862, Dave said, May 15, 1862, during an opening game played at Union Baseball and Cricket Grounds in Brooklyn. Source was the Time Magazine article from 2 days ago. See, I didn't research. I was trying to research that over the weekend. Didn't see, like I said, I didn't spend a lot of time on it because it wasn't really that important to me. Now, let me get into this before we totally run out of time here. Make sure I got everything set up here. All right. The left's brilliant scam behind the national anthem protest. And I've seen this, and I also, like I said, I have this other article I want to read to you. It says it didn't happen until last night. This is by Jazz Shaw over at hotair.com. It didn't happen until last night. For the entire time, the recent spat of highly inflamed national anthem protest on NFL playing fields has been unfolding this year. There's been something nagging at the back of my mind. Watching liberal activists, not to be confused with rank and file voters who happen to be registered Democrats, but who enjoy sports, charging the barricades over these displays of kneeling, sitting, or otherwise acting disrespectfully during the playing of the anthem and the display of the American flag. Something just didn't seem right. But last night was when it hit me. It isn't about protesting racism, police misconduct, or anything of the sort. What we're observing is potentially one of the greatest red herrings in American history of American political scams. The question I was most confused over was, why this location? Why this particular time? The reality is that any of these well-paid players could call a press conference or show up at any rally to talk about racism, police shootings, and all the rest, and they would draw the attention of millions, along with the media. God only knows ESPN would show up. Little dig at ESPN there. So why were these liberal activists listening or insisting that it had to be at the start of the game while the national anthem is playing and the flag is on display? It didn't make sense, and then suddenly it did. I think the light bulb finally went on when I was reading this piece on the subject from the Washington Post, Jonathan Capehart. And I have the link. There's a link in the article. If you go to the article, I also put a link up in the show notes page about that. It's taking a knee with Colin Kaepernick and standing up with Stephen Curry against Trump. And this was posted over on September 24th this year. It wasn't really so much that the author had to say, because that was probably the 15th tirade of that sort I'd read in just the past week. No, it was more a matter of who was saying it. To his credit, Jonathan is honest enough to open the piece with a statement reminding people that he is not much of a sports fan, but that doesn't begin to describe him. For those who have ever watched Capehart fill in for Willie Geist on MSNBC's old Way Too Early show, you'll know what I mean. It became something of a running gag, which Jonathan engaged in with a great sense of humor, to watch him attempt to read the teleprompter on Monday morning and describe what had happened around the NFL the day before. Frequently, he had to be rescued by Bill Cairns, jumping in to offer some commentary from the perspective of somebody who had actually seen the game and knew how football worked. Keep in mind that Bill is a meteorologist, not the sports analyst, although he did compete in several sports in school. With that complete lack of engagement complete lack of engagement in professional football, why would Jonathan and so many of his progressive colleagues be so completely driven to support and gin up protest taking place on the gridiron? Why did they suddenly care so much about the intersection of racial identity, politics, and football? The answer is they don't. This has little or nothing to do with police shootings, racial profilings, or any of the rest. What we're seeing is an almost brilliant and concerted effort to damage, if not eliminate, the National Football League. Why? Because the activist left has despised the NFL for years. They hate everything about it. It's a game filled with big, tough, manly men engaging in the closest thing to warfare you can manage without guns. It's a game rife with symbolism and, yes, nationalism. Even people who would never buy an album from a country singer could feel their blood heating up when Hank Williams used to be singing, "Are you ready for some football?" I love that song. You know, Monday Night Football song, right? The military loves football, and they fly jets over the stadiums in formation and send our nation's finest out to pay tribute. And it's not just the military. Our police and other first responders are frequently called out for honors at the games. Everything about it screams of apple pie, fireworks, and patriotism. And if you prefer, if you would prefer, God, guns, and flags. And the activist left hates it. Probably the only sporting event they despise more is NASCAR. And holding the reading up here, folks, NASCAR, they look at NASCAR as a good old boys club. That they're a bunch of white rednecks, racist, you know, because it got its start with bootleggers down south. That's where NASCAR comes from. The roots of NASCAR are tied directly to bootlegging illegally made whiskey or moonshine. And they think it's just an all-white, you know, a white male type thing. There have been, and there is today, Danica Kirkpatrick is a female driver, but again, she's white, so she has that going against her. There's been a couple other female drivers attempting in the past. I think Danica has been in there the longest. And so they really don't like NASCAR, you know, and a couple other reasons why too. NASCAR is not environmentally friendly. It's not. You got these cars with these petroleum-made tires, with burning gasoline, have oil. Sometimes they spill that oil all over the track, and they got to dry it up, so it's not environmentally friendly. So they're adding to the destruction of the planet with climate change and everything. So NASCAR is probably the most despised sport, but I think these, and right or wrong, I'm just putting this out there, I think these activists would be scared to go to a NASCAR event to protest, okay? I'm just saying, okay, right or wrong. All right, Jazz continues here. And this isn't the first ginned up attack on the NFL that the left has orchestrated. Observe the running debate, mostly driven by liberals, about how concussions and other long-term physical effects on players make the sport unsafe. Do you honestly think it's because they care about the health of the players? Activists have gone so far as to point out that even concussions caused by repeated, far lighter taps on the head are too much of a risk. Have you ever seen the left getting that worked up over soccer, where both kids and adults have to repeatedly take shots on a goal or make passes to another teammate by bouncing a high-speed ball off their head? Now I want to stop the reading here. There was a PSA out years and years ago, probably in the mid 1990s to early 2000s, on the Rush Limbaugh show, where they're talking about these head injuries to kids. And everybody thought that this PSA that he put out about soccer being a very dangerous sport was just a tongue-in-cheek thing, and it really wasn't. He had facts and articles and stuff up that he had to back up the facts that soccer players from the youngest on up suffer more concussions than football players. And yet you don't hear them talking about that. Okay? And Jazz does a really good job going through this. I really appreciate his article here. For that matter, have you ever seen these levels of protest over boxing, which literally gets some warriors of the rings killed, and they constantly hit with the crushing blows to the skull? How about rugby, a sport which makes alligator wrestling look boring? Nope. The only real attention is paid to the dangers of football. Soccer is very European, and politically correct. And this is where the crux of the matter is here. You can't find American rugby on TV, and I have no idea why they don't care about boxers. You'd think they might, because the lion's share of professional boxers are minorities, and the blows to the head they receive are far more damaging over the long run. It was never about the health of the players. It was all about damaging the NFL, and that's what's fueling the national anthem debate as well. And to their credit, it seems to be working this time. No amount of campaigning or colored ribbons would have gotten the faithful NFL fans to abandon Americans' favorite sport. But if they could manage to get the players to start dragging politics out of the press briefing room and onto the field, they might be the final straw to break the camel's back. If they could drive a wedge between the players and the fans and then divide the fans themselves into splintering, warring camps, arguing over the politically correct aspects of these offensive players or displays, they might finally put a dent in the popularity of football. And it seems to be working. The ratings of Sunday Night Football this week were the worst ever in a decade, and I have those on a link up in the show notes page about that. Viewerships over the games was off as well. People I've been following on social media for years who would rather risk their jobs than miss a game featuring their home team are so disgusted that they're not even bothering to tune in. Divisive, infuriating identity politics was probably the only thing with the potential to kill football if you could find a way to inject a hefty dose into the NFL's bloodstream, and now they've done it. But the fight's not over yet. One man who walked alone out of the locker room to salute the flag and honor the playing of our country's national anthem during the Pittsburgh Steelers game has now the fastest selling jersey in the NFL store. And he's a lineman. When does that happen? The fans have been put off their feed before, but the game has survived and thrived. This may be one of those most insidious assaults on the NFL has ever seen, but I have to believe it can survive this too. But full credit to the leftist activists leading this charge. We almost have to salute you for the brilliance of the plan in an Auric Goldfinger sort of way. That's a reference back to a James Bond movie if you're not familiar with that. That was kind of a long article there, but Jazz makes a lot of good points here. Makes a lot of good points. I still have my Green Bay Packers hat. I'm going to wear it on the show from time to time. I have 3 more hats I've just put into rotation, so you'll see fewer and fewer of all my hats, and maybe not so few of my Ohio State hats, but all the rest of them I'll cycle. I want to cycle those through. I'm not going to abandon football. I like football. I like watching football. I'm a little disgusted by what's going on right now, but for me, it's not so much the national anthem. For me, it's the politics that they brought to the football field. For me, it's the politics that they brought to the game. And I lay a lot of this at the feet of ESPN. ESPN has been infiltrated by anti-freedom folks who do not want to see the country survive. And this is, folks, if you think about this attack on the NFL, this is not unlike the attack on marriage, where the leftists were just all up in arms that gay people didn't have the same right to marry as straight folks. And they wanted to change the definition of marriage in order to get that done. Okay? They got that done. Did it destroy the institution of marriage? No. I believe the institution of marriage is stronger than this, and it will survive this. It really will. I think the statistics and history and stats and everything is on our side as far as those supporters like me of marriage. But you don't hear them talking about that much anymore. It's always an afterthought. So they think they've won that battle, so they've left it. And again, I do not believe it's going to permanently damage the institution of marriage. Another thing, why are liberals, why are anti-freedom folks so much in support of Islamic terrorists and Muslims? And folks, it's no more complicated than this. Anti-freedom folks, social democrats, these collectivists out there, these secular ethical humanists out there, do not like America the way it is. They don't like the freedoms and liberties that are protected by our Constitution. because we're not smart enough to handle our own freedoms and liberties. And so what they do, what these leftists, what these social democrats, these anti-freedom folks in the country, what they do is anything that they view will help destroy the system we have set up now, they're all for it. They really are all for it, and they'll do anything they can to support it, even though like supporting Islam and Muslims goes against the feminists that are in the anti-freedom movement, because you never hear them talking about protesting what's going on in these Arab countries, these Muslim countries, I should say, not Arab, these Muslim countries, and the outright just destruction of the women in these cultures. You know, when you look at things honestly, you say, how can they support them and be for women's rights at the same time? It doesn't make sense. And the only way it makes sense is because it goes against Western values. It goes against American values, where we want to protect, as a man, I want to protect my wife. I want to be the breadwinner. I want to be the defender of my family. You know, I don't want her to have to stand up and defend the family. I want to be the one to do that. I want to protect her a little bit, shield her a little bit from some of the things in the world. Because I believe that's my role. I should do that as the head of the house, the man. And this is ingrained in Western society. But the anti-freedom folks and leftists, they don't like that. So anything they can do, even though this doesn't make a hill of beans of sense, for these people to be out there burning their jerseys, I understand the frustrations in that. I understand where they're coming from, but they need to step back for a second and start asking why. Start getting a little Socratic about it. Why is this happening? And again, Jazz makes a really good point here. I don't think I'm going to get to this other article here from the Mises, but I want you to go read that. Stop wrapping the flag around pro sports. I think Jazz makes a good point here. A lot of good points here about what's going on. And we need to start asking why. Why is the national anthem doing this? Why did not Kaepernick, instead of protesting on the field, protesting at his job, and not thinking ahead about what this means, you can't. And let's say that your audience, whether in the stands or on TV, are split politically, 50-50, 50 conservative, 50 liberal. You can't alienate 50% of your viewer base and expect to survive as a sport. It's just not going to happen. And so Kaepernick didn't think this through. His supporters now, the liberal supporters that are behind the national anthem protests, they're just as giddy as can be. And they're even getting more giddier when they see these folks burning their I mean, some of them jerseys are hundreds of dollars. And these people out there just burning it because they're so upset. This too shall pass. It will pass. I think the NFL will survive. I think cooler heads are going to prevail. And again, whether they do or not is not the issue, and I think people need to get over that. It's a tradition. National anthem is a tradition. Okay? And I think if they're gonna, if the sports stadium or the teams who own the stadiums, along with the local governments and stuff like that, if they want this tradition to be carried out, I think people should do it in a respectful manner. If you're going to play politics, keep it off the field. People do not want to go to a game and see politics. They don't want to tune into ESPN and see politics. They just don't want to do it. They just don't want to do it at all. And I don't blame them. I don't either. Sometimes when I get done with the show, I just want to sit down, after I get done with everything and get the next day's show started or prepped and everything. Sometimes I just want to decompress. I don't want to think about politics. I don't want to be bothered with it. And sometimes I'll watch a good show or I'll read a book, read one of my periodicals like The Gospel Advocate or something like that, get caught up on some of my reading that way, read my Bible, study the Bible, stuff like that. I just want to decompress. I don't want politics 24/7. And if people want politics, they know where to go to find it. But bringing politics onto the field, especially when you live or die by the viewer, when you live or die by the fan, you make your livelihood because of the fans. That's a recipe for disaster. And until the players understand that, and it may take a little bit. Let's say the NFL takes a huge hit this season, and viewership's down. According to some reports I've read, viewership's down almost 26% from last year. That's a huge hit. That's over a quarter of a viewership, and it may not end yet. This may only be the tip of the iceberg. And what's going to happen at the end, let's say, and God forbid this happens, but let's say at the end of the season, viewership is down 50%. Sponsorships, because of viewerships, all those monies are either refunded or cut. Advertisers are at the end of the year going to say, look, this isn't what we signed up for. We're going to renegotiate our contracts. Will the NFL and the teams be able to afford the players multi-million-dollar contracts like they do now? No. But you know what? It may have to come to that before these players realize, saying, hey, maybe my political protest would be better if I kept it off field. If all I did on the field was play football. Stand for the national anthem if that's what we're going to do. Play football, leave politics totally out of it, and go do my protesting somewhere else. As far as I know, I haven't heard any of these players, Kaepernick included, going to some of these places like Ferguson and these other, Baltimore and that, going there protesting, holding rallies, about police brutality in New York City, Baltimore, Ferguson, wherever it's happening, Louisiana. I don't hear them. You don't see them on the news, and you would. These are sports figures that are very famous, and if they did do that, then you might have something there. You just might have something there. Well, folks, I'm running out of time. Sometimes these hours go fast when I get involved in these things. I love talking about these things. But in the end, again, I think it's more of a tradition. And if you want to follow the tradition, fine. If you don't, fine. But we sort of need to pull back from our sports and quit wrapping them up in the flag, quit wrapping them up in patriotism to the point where we're alienating folks. Let's have some good old rivalries like Volunteers and the Buckeyes. The Vols and the Buckeyes, or Green Bay Packer and the Chicago Bears. Let's have some good rivalries there, and just leave the politics out of sports, folks. Just leave it out. And at the end of the day, I think everything would be better. I really do. At the end of the day, leave politics out of sports, and the viewers be happier, the money will keep flowing in, advertisers be happier, and everything like that. It's been the Dan Clemens Show. I'm your host, Dan Clemens, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon.